I went to meet a client a couple of days ago. We usually meet in a local coffee shop. She works in an adult-oriented business and wants to learn how to use covert hypnosis so that she can increase profits. We usually meet once a month or so, and I took an Uber this time and she drove. When we were finished, she saw me getting ready to call an Uber home, and so she offered me a ride. I said sure without really thinking. I'm pretty sketchy about letting people know where I live. I try to keep my professional life separate from my private life. That's why I don't usually have clients in my house. But I didn't really think of that when I made this decision. We were halfway back to my place and she said she wanted to stop by and say hey to her grandma. She promised it wouldn't take long and it was on the way. She was at some meeting at a local community center. We stopped and it was some kind of a knitting club. The guy who invented the sewing machine was like any other inventor. He saw a need and figured if he could invent something that everybody could use, he could make a lot of money. This was obviously before sewing machines had been invented. If you've ever sewed anything, you have to first thread the needle. Then you have to push it through the cloth and then bring it back through the other side. He was trying to figure out a way to automate this. One night he was having a dream about being chased through some jungle. The guys were throwing their spears at him, and he had kind of an understanding from inside of his dream that the anxiety from the spears was the same as his anxiety of not being able to solve the sewing problem. It's similar to the guy who discovered the chemical structure of benzene. The composition of benzene is easy to figure out by atomic weights. Back then, they knew it had 6 carbon atoms and 6 hydrogen atoms, C6H6, but they didn't know the exact structure of how they were connected to each other. The guy that was trying to figure the structure out had a dream one night about a snake eating its tail. This is a common and kind of a secret technique used by inventors to use your dreams to help solve problems. Edison, for example, would sit in a quiet room, close his eyes, and hold out a weight. He would force his mind to relax and focus only on his thoughts. Eventually, he would drift to sleep and drop the weight. Then he'd wake up and immediately write down as many ideas as he could. It's believed by many metaphysicians that there are 3 parts to your mind. There's the conscious and the subconscious, which we all have inside of our brains. But then there is the superconscious, which is only accessible through our subconscious. So the trick is to find a way to access the subconscious and a way to connect through the subconscious to infinite intelligence. The best way to do this is through the dreaming state, particularly lucid dreaming. If you can practice lucid dreaming, then you can use lucid dreaming. You can use lucid dreaming to create solutions. You can use lucid dreaming to solve problems. You can use lucid dreaming to connect to infinite intelligence. You can use lucid dreaming to become more seductive. You can use lucid dreaming to become more persuasive. You can use lucid dreaming to become more intelligent. As soon as he woke up, he realized what it meant, the snake eating its tail. Benzene is called a benzene ring. It's 6 carbon atoms in a loop that form a hexagon with alternating double bonds. From each carbon atom on the outside of the circle is a single bond to a hydrogen atom. Once the guy made the connection inside of his dream to the spears and the sewing machine problem, he noticed that the spears were a little different. They each had a tiny hole in the front of the spear. That's the difference between sewing by hand and sewing with a machine. A sewing machine has the hole in the front of the needle, like the spears in the guy's dream. Even though these old ladies were knitting, they were sitting in a circle, which reminded me of the metaphor of a sewing circle, which I always thought was just a saying. I didn't think they actually had sewing circles. At first, these old ladies were really sweet and friendly, but then once they realized that I wasn't anybody important, nor that I was going to be upset, they switched back to their normal mode of speaking. They sounded kind of like sailors in their use of language, which reminded me of Betty White in that scene with a movie about the big alligator, when she looked at the cop and said, "You know, if I were a man, this is when I'd tell you to suck my